Right. Well, I'm actually going to begin with you, Harlan. I was wondering when you make a sort of when you write a sort of book and eventually it becomes a series like Stay Close As Here, do the actors who play the roles like Richard, like James, Sarah, do they become the roles that you first created? When you now picture these characters, do you see the actors who were cast?
I do. First of all, it's been a decade since I read the book, other than having to read it right before hand, which is always a strange experience because even I'm reading it going, where am I going with this? Like, I don't know if I just make myself forget it all. But one of the cool things about collaborating, and maybe because I was thinking about this, maybe because I'm a novelist. And so when I'm a novelist, I'm a dictator, right? I'm everything. I'm writer, actor, director. I'm key grip. I don't know what a key grip is, but I'm key grip. So when I'm able to work with people like this, like Richard here, I love the collaboration. I actually really love to hear what they have to say and how they want to change it. It's almost a little bit like I maybe birthed these characters, but now someone else is going to help raise them and bring them into the world, and they end up being different than what I created. And I kind of love that. I sort of love that collaboration. So yeah, I do. I will sometimes, now that Richard's been on 2 shows, I will call him Richard, but there'll be times that I will rethink of them as, I was just on with, I think of Look at Jimmy, I'm like, oh, there's Broom, there's Lorraine there. So sometimes I actually do it the other way, where I start thinking of the actor as the character. But yes, especially in this case, working with a cast this amazing, I do see now Lorraine as Sarah, I do see Cush as Megan as Cush. And
well, yeah, because obviously you're, as someone who's been in a whole myriad of different shows and films and TV across your career, do you, when it comes to when something is based on a very popular novel or popular series of books, for example, do you use the book sometimes to help craft the character, or do you almost have to separate the books from the screenplay and really treat the character from as the one that was written on the page in the script?
No, I mean, when I look back at most of my work, for some reason, I seem to gravitate towards working on pieces and characters that come from literature, and maybe I choose it, or maybe it finds me. But yeah, I mean, and I'm a bit of a stoic for respecting the writer. I love having that Bible there that you can delve back into, and I tend to find each scene in the script and then label it in the book so that you have instant access to what the writer was thinking of. Because the difference between a novel and a screenplay is that the writer will tell you what's going on inside the character's mind, and in a way, it's my job to carry that into the visual story. So I loved kind of being able to find exactly the scene that exists, and some of them don't exist, but you use all kinds of things. But Harlan will give me the interior of the character, and I take that, and it's not necessarily the desire to change it, but you want to make it walk and talk and think and breathe, because on the page it's printed words, but I love that process, and part of that for me is finding kind of music and images to just really give them a whole life. I usually figure out what their politics are and all this kind of, you just create, an entire character, because in a novel you're part of a tapestry of many, many characters, and I have to fill it out as much as I can, as much as time will allow.
Stefan, I'm here. Ask away.
Well, I was going to ask a question to Richard about your work, which I can ask now because we can't see you blush now if he sort of like talks really highly of it, which is quite.
He won't talk highly, so it's not a problem. So.
No, but it's because I mean, Harlan's work and material is something that is. I mean, there's a reason why it's got a huge, big Netflix kind of deal, and obviously you've worked before with The Stranger, Richard. What makes Harlan's writing so watchable and so easily adaptable into cracking TV?
Well, as Harlan said before, I mean, he used the word dictator, but I wouldn't use that. I would say he's a director, when he writes, because you're creating the scene. Everything about it is a kind of cinematic construction. And I think that, I mean, it would be my question of, as modern writers, are we influenced heavily by cinema? Because I think it's impossible not to be, or cinema or any kind of visual medium, because it is flooded into our lives. And even when I'm creating a character, I sort of dream in cinematic images. And I think Harlan writes so brilliantly in cinematic vocabulary. But added to that, like I just said, he gives you the interior of the characters' thoughts and feelings, their past, their hopes, their dreams. And so he's sort of offering you like the entire kind of smorgasbord to choose from. And but aside from that, the settings are always kind of crying out to be photographed. So I can see why it's kind of catnip for TV and film producers. And I think we sit there waiting with bated breath for the next book to see like what is this going to look and feel like, because from the first page you start to create images in your head when you read Harlan's work. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, Harlan, if there's a very visual, very striking and authentic visual feel to your work, as Richard said, you can picture the places, but often your work takes you to Britain. Have you spent a lot of time in Britain to be able to have that visual landscape in your mind that you then put onto the page?
Well, my brother's lived in England now for 24 years, I think, 25 years almost. I've been there many times. But I think that's part of the collaboration. I mean, one of the things I'm able to do with Netflix is The Innocent was filmed in Barcelona in Spain, and The Woods was filmed in Poland, and Gone for Good was filmed in France. So it's part of the collaboration, even if I don't know a place well, is trying to find those versions of it, the British version or the French version or the Spanish version. And taking, what I've already, very specific places and trying to make them universal. What I found in writing is the more specific you are, the more universal the appeal. The more if I try to write a book that's every town USA versus being specifically about New Jersey, that's when you start to lose it. I have a friend who's in the clothing industry. His clothes are very, very specific for Palm Beach in the summer. When they try to spread out, when they try to make something that's maybe a little more bland that the rest of the country will like, they always bomb. So it's the same kind of a thing. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's in Manchester or if it's in Newark, New Jersey. You have to find those places and those settings and those worlds that will spring to life specifically for those environments.
Does the authenticity extend to kids actually hiring photographers for their bar mitzvahs? Because that's something I can't believe I didn't get a red carpet out and walk down it when I was like 13 years old, just at my birthday party.
I've been to one of those parties. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, as soon as I saw that was a real job, I'm like, whoa, there's no way I'm trying to think what could be lower than being a paparazzi. Well, a paparazzi for hire.
Fake.
A paparazzi working a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something like that. And as soon as I saw that, I figured it's how the book opens actually on Ray, Richard's character, and working in one of those bar mitzvahs. I'm like, how can I start a character and really show how low he has sunk? And so that's where I just was fascinated by that sort of occupation. And that's where Ray sort of started out. And then you ask, how did he get there? Where is he? What happened in his life that led him there? And that's how I write all of the books. You kind of start with something like that, and then you just keep working off it until a character emerges.
Have you ever had an interest in photography, Richard, before?
I've bought very expensive cameras in the past and never really known how to use them. But I think, as you develop as an actor and you watch cinematographers creating shots and creating, painting with light and all this kind of thing, my brain starts to work in that way. So this was really interesting to take on a character like this. And I studied a guy called Tim Hetherington, who I thought would be a good model for the role. Loosely, I just looked at his pathway into the industry and what kind of cameras he used. Harlan was just talking about getting specific, and when the props department call you and say what cameras do you think your character uses, it was really nice to be able to be very specific and give them a £9,000 camera that they couldn't afford. It's one of the joys of this profession for me, is that every role I take on, you get to sort of learn a little bit about that profession. And so, I did learn about the twin lens camera that he used and developing, and, what time of day he would shoot, and part of the interesting thing about the character, unlike some of the other themes that Harlan talks about, which is about people hiding their past, is that Ray's past is hidden from him. So he's going back through images, trying to trigger his memory by looking at the photographs he took of this particular night, because there's 17 years of just fragments that have come through. So it was interesting to sort of, for myself, to create a biography of images of different events. I think that's quite a human thing. I think we all have, your iPhone will throw up a couple of pictures to remind you of, this particular date in time. I think we live in pictures, really.
Yeah. My final question before I go is, Harlan, I was going to ask you speak about the kind of art and the importance of collaboration, but now it's something you'll probably be a bit more used to by the time Stay Close is here. But is it quite hard handing over your material to other storytellers, filmmakers, TV, execs or directors? Because I guess there is a kind of precious sense of this belongs to you. And is that something you've just had to get used to across your career, is kind of giving it to someone and letting them bring their own interpretation to the characters or to the project and story?
In this case, no, just because I'm working on it full time with them. I mean, I'm an executive producer, and I'm there the work that they do every day, pretty much. I get the rushes and the dailies, and I'm there to table reads. I'm helping write all the scripts. So I'm heavily involved. And so I can't also duck it by saying, oh, I can blame somebody else. If you don't like it, you can come right to me and yell at me. I don't, I love that kind of ownership. But at the same time, it's also the thrill of it. It's not to sound Pollyanna, but unfortunately I was on set this time, but there's always a moment when I go on a set of a show and I'm watching all these people milling around, and I'm looking at all this incredible cast that's in this one. Besides Richard, you're having, Cush and Jimmy Nesbitt and Sarah Parish and Eddie Izzard and Joe. And I mean, everybody who's in this show. And I just go, wow, I had this little idea in this room I'm sitting in now, and all these wonderful, talented people are bringing it to life for 190 countries, 200 million Netflix subscribers. That's really heady. And that's, if I start getting jaded about that, somebody yell at me or slap me in the back of the head, because that's really such an honor and such a privilege.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, guys. Just lovely to see you both and hear you, Harlan.
Thanks. I know. Thank you, Stefan. It was really nice talking to you.
You too. Bye, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey